Okay, so this is December 26, 2020, and this is part of the last words series, and this one's called Thyroid, and I want to hurry up and do this fast and see how fast I can just have the last word on this story. It's called Thyroid, and I want to tell my personal thyroid story. So if you go on YouTube and you look up Dr. Boris, Boris, Katz, C-A-T-Z, or is it K-A-T-Z? Not quite sure. But you will find on YouTube, or at least there was, an interview that this medical student did with Dr. Boris Katz. He was out of California. He operated with the UCLA Medical Center, okay? So him and his family immigrated from Eastern Europe or Germany. I guess they were escaping World War II and the Hitler situation because they were Jewish, and they moved over to Mexico City. And he talks about in the interview how, in one of them, there's probably a couple, about how he went to university there in Mexico City, and then he studied medicine, and then he got into being a thyroid specialist. This would be in the 50s. Okay, I was, so in the 50s, so I was born in the 50s as well. So anyhow, and then he ended up aligning with these other doctors / scientists and all this over there in California in the United States, over at UCLA, and he ended up getting an office over there. Anyway, he's a thyroid specialist. I'm just going to call him that because when I was a teenager, my mother took me to see him because she thought I was having physical problems, and my doctor said that I was anemic. I had anemia. You know, I went for an annual checkup. I was like 14, or probably like around 14, so they thought I had anemia because my blood count was off the thing there. So they gave me, first they said, well, let her take 1-a-day vitamins. And nobody asked me what I ate or anything about my diet or my lifestyle or any kind of misery I was in or anything like that. So they took my blood count. It was bad. The 1-a-day vitamins didn't change my blood count. And then they said, then the pediatrician I had, whose name was Dr. Nirenberg, of all names, he was my doctor the whole time I was growing up. So he said to my mother, take her to the specialist here, Dr. Boris Katz. So she took me to Boris Katz, and most of the time his office was not in an office. It was upstairs in some apartment building. That's what I remember. So anyway, he said, well, we're going to do some tests. So they did some tests. So the first test was they gave me what was called a barium enema. And what they did was they shot up a bunch of barium liquid, and that was so they put radioactive iodine or whatever the fuck it was, and so they could do x-rays. So they shot up the barium enema, and then I had to lay on this table for like an hour, and they lowered this, of all things, a huge black box, which was some sort of weird x-ray machine, and I had to stay perfectly still for an hour, and then this box it came all the way down to my stomach. It was like a couple inches between my stomach area and this x-ray machine, and I had to lay perfectly still, and this box just went back and forth, up and down my stomach for a fucking hour, right? And I had to hold in this enema while I took these x-rays. So this would have been the year like 1972 or something like that, because I left in 74. It was 73. So anyway, that was their style of trying to find out what was wrong with me. Okay, so they did that, and then the other test, which was really murder, was, I shouldn't say murder, they had to take bone marrow out of my back to check my bone marrow to see what was wrong with me. So my mother took me to this other bone marrow specialist doctor, and it was where I learned patience, because we had to wait. My mother came with me in the room, and they made me put on that white robe and everything. And then they said, you got to wait for this doctor. So we had to wait. He was really late. I looked at the clock, waiting an hour, and I took pride in myself because I didn't complain, and I waited on the table instead of my mother. Anyway, finally this old guy came in a white robe. He said, we're going to do the thyroid thing. And he laid me on my back, and all he said was, well, this needle's going to have to go through it. Don't worry, it won't hurt. And I was able to see my mother's face while they did the torturous needle thing, and it was this really 12-inch needle. And then as he punched the needle through my bone on the left side of my hip bone, he sort of like took his fist and pounded my back next to the needle so that I remember the pounding on my back. And that was while the needle was going in, and I don't know if there's any anesthesia local, there probably was. But anyway, as he pounded, that was supposed to alleviate the imagery and the pain of the needle going in. So yeah, he did that. That was during Easter holiday, I remember, because I couldn't hardly walk after, like, for 2 days, could hardly walk. And ever since then, I used to have this chronic pain in my hip, on my the left hip bone on my back, lower back. I would always get this, chronic pain back there at that site, which was like a memory kind of pain, which was with me my whole life until I got pregnant. And during the pregnancy, the pain went away. I thought it'd be terrible. And I hardly have any back pain ever since I had that child 25 years ago. So that happened. So anyway, after the test, it was like, well, she's got a thyroid problem. It's underactive, overactive. I actually even forget which is hypo and hyper. Sorry, I just forget which one it was. But it was probably under. Whether that's hypo or hyper. I think it's hypo, whatever. So Boris Katz said, okay, you have to take 3 grains of thyroid for the rest of your life, or you'll probably die. I was 15. Okay. So I started taking the 3 grains of thyroid. Now, like I say, nobody changed my diet. What was my diet like? Well, I woke up, I ate Captain Crunch cereal, went to school. What did I do in school about candy? I ate that. Didn't eat hardly any lunch. Drank a little vodka at high school. Came home at night, and then, we had meat, potatoes kind of thing for dinner. Never had a fresh vegetable in my whole entire life. In fact, when I came home from school, I used to go to the sugar bowl. And I'd take a teaspoon of sugar, put the teaspoon of sugar in the sugar bowl, sit in front of the TV, and lick that sugar off the spoon. White sugar, that was it. Then I also had a fondness for macaroni and butter, and I would make macaroni of some kind, and butter and salt, that was it. And sit there and eat little macaroni after everything. So then we would eat dinner. Then we'd have ice cream and cake. So that was all I ate. I mean, that was my diet. I didn't eat sprouts, all this stuff. So anyway, 3 grains of thyroid. So what happened was, after that time, teenage years got rough. I tried to run away from home once spontaneously, but I didn't take my thyroid pills with me, so I came back. And then the second time I tried to run away from home, that didn't work. And the thyroid was a concern, because I actually half-assed sort of believed that if I didn't take the thyroid pills, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, the third time I ran away from home, I took the thyroid pills, and they only give you enough for a month. Okay, so it lasts a month. So I took them, and then I was gone. So here's the thing. So I ran away from home, took the thyroid pills. Well, that runaway, which is another story unto itself, but I was gone for 2 months before they found me again. I was 17. Actually, I was 16. So during that 2 months, my life had totally changed. I met this, I like to call him the pre-soulmate, kind of the first soulmate person. That's a long story. Anyway, he took me to Big Sur, California, and we lived in Big Sur, camped out for a month. And this guy, so it was like 1974, so actually, yes, 74, so it was like the post-hippie day kind of thing. So anyway, he taught me how to eat beans and sprouts and carob. And for like a whole month, I didn't eat the diet I grew up with. I didn't live in the apartment that was toxic for me and everything. I lived out in the outdoors, and that's when I realized that the way to heal my body was just to live outside and get out of the city. So what happened was, after the 30 days, I ran out of thyroid pills, right? So I was still on the run, hiding out, but the boyfriend took me back to, Santa Monica, and there was free clinics. So I went to this free clinic. I said, I need thyroid pills, and of course it was life or death medicine. They give it to you. So they sent me to this hospital, this tall floor hospital in Santa Monica, upstairs so I could look out and see the ocean and everything. And so the doctor came down, and so they took a blood test, I suppose. Okay, now the thing was, I had been off the pills because I'd ran out, so it was maybe a week or two when I hadn't taken the thyroid pills. Did I notice a difference? No, I hadn't. And I had started to take birth control pills because the free clinic earlier than that given me birth control. So I was taking birth control pills and thyroid pills together, but I ran out of thyroid pills. So the doctor gave me the test, and he says, he came out after the test results. He looks at me and he goes, "Why are you taking 3 grains of thyroid?" And I said, "Well, because Dr. Boris Katz told me to, or else I'd die." He said, "Well, your blood tests show that your blood's perfectly normal. You don't need this." Okay, well, he was this tall, young doctor. It looked like he was talking about. So I sat there at the table. I said, "Oh, okay, I don't need it. Okay, that's good. I guess maybe I changed my lifestyle. I didn't need it." So, in my mind, I didn't need him. So I went back to the boyfriend. But then, a little while later, events occurred. I got arrested on the beach or whatever, and so they had to call my mother. So, but it was another thing. So anyway, being a runaway for those 2 months didn't work. So they called my mother and they sent me back home. When they sent me back home to my mother, it was lockdown, pretty much, and it was like, "Oh my God, we have to take you back to Boris Katz because you're not taking your thyroid. This is bad." So she took me to Boris Katz, right? And he wrote the prescription, put her back on the thyroid like this. Now listen to this. As my mother and I are leaving his apartment building office, Boris Katz says to us, he says, "If you take birth control pills at the same time as thyroid pills, you will die." He says, "Don't do it. The 2 chemicals together will mess up." Now, if you go and listen to Boris Katz doing his lectures about stuff, he talks a lot about how he invented. This is so interesting because he talks about how they came up with thyroid medication and why. Now listen, back then in the San Fernando Valley, they were doing a lot of tests, nuclear testing and all this. Part of the beep, 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 I won't say it, but it starts with MKULTRA. Part of the experimentation going on with the families and everything like that in Los Angeles had to do with how people reacted to nuclear, the radiation and stuff like that. If you explore that arena of testing nuclear radiation, you'll find out that. Well, so the year I was born, in fact, I found a newspaper article. I'm backtracking a little bit. The newspaper article was written back in the 80s, and it said all the little babies that were born in the year I was born in the San Fernando Valley had been smothered in an invisible cloud of radiation from a certain test. And so if you were born in that particular year, you could expect that by the time you were 40, you're going to die of liver cancer. I found the article in the National Enquirer in like 1984, and I cut the article out and I saved it in a thing because I thought, oh my God, that article is about me. So what if I'm going to die at 40? And at that time I wasn't 40 yet, so I'm past 40, so I didn't die. So, but anyway, as I was leaving Boris Katz's office, and he said that to my mother, the thing was I was already taking the thyroid pills. I was already taking the birth control pills with the thyroid, so I didn't say anything. I'm like, oh shit. He says I'm going to die, but I haven't died. I'm already taking the pills he said not to take. So that happened. So anyway, what happened was I had to make another escape and ran away from home again. And this time I stayed gone for years. It's a long story. But when I finally left again, I stayed gone for years. And I quit taking the thyroid pills. I never took them again in my whole life. In fact, I never took any pharmaceuticals ever again after that year, because what happened was I just decided that there was some kind of thing going on. You didn't really need them unless you had to have them. Plus, I was so poor all the time that I didn't have enough money for medicines or vitamins or anything like that. And then I read Back to Eden, studied herbs, so I did everything herbs. And everything I learned when I got sick, I always got sick. I had all kinds of illnesses, but then I found these remedies that didn't involve pharmaceuticals, and I had an aversion to pharmaceuticals. I didn't trust them. I didn't take an aspirin. So I did take birth control pills for the next 2 years, and I had issues, but they were because of the birth control pills. Of course, you're going to have issues if you take birth control pills. And then finally I went off of them, like a year or something like that into it. So I stopped taking them in about 1977. Never took another birth control pill. Never took more pharmaceuticals, even though I had hepatitis, all these diseases. So those are other stories. But I wanted to tell the story about Dr. Boris Katz, because what happened was he even admits it in the lecture he gives, where he says, this particular thing he says is that he said that when the scientists were doing this nuclear testing, there were going to be ailments in the populations, and the thyroid, school of medicine there was going to have to come up with remedies for the injured and altered thyroid conditions that were going to pop up in the population. Do you know what I mean? So so like they caused the, that's another situation where they caused the problem, and then the reaction is a bunch of thyroid fucked up people, and the solution is thyroid medication. So now the way I didn't need thyroid medication was I changed my lifestyle and I actually moved out of the area. See, so ever since then, I've always had to move out of the poison, toxic freaking area. That's how I handled it. Now it seems to me like a lot of the population has sort of adapted to that sort of chemical environment. Good for them, but not me. I had to adapt to some other way of environment, so I never went back to LA. So I was always afraid of Los Angeles itself because all these bad things had happened. But the thyroid story is interesting. So look up Dr. Boris Katz. He gives this wonderful lecture, and I'm not disrespecting him or anything, you know, because these are scientists and they figure out how to make drugs. So these drugs have saved people's lives, and my mother took thyroid pills until she died. I mean, this was like normal. This is what people call normal. And it was normal. If you stayed in the city, you adapted. So they were adapting people. They were making pillborgs, not cyborgs, pillborgs or whatever, out of human beings since that time that were adapted to meds. Not me. Well, after I'm just saying, after I had that experience, I thought, well, everybody's going to figure this out, and the world's going to get better because people don't need the medications. All they need to do is change their lifestyle. But as you can see, most of that hasn't happened. Okay, so anyway, look up Dr. Boris Katz on YouTube. He does this video with this medical student, and he talks about the thing. And it was the first time I heard him talk was on YouTube. Yay! So that will tell you a story about thyroid. If anybody's listening to this because they have thyroid issues, maybe this will help you stop eating white sugar. You might have to move. You might have to change your location. I don't know. But just study the thing and listen to him, because he is known as this big old specialist who invented the medication. So I'm so happy to be able to say that. And I hope this goes through. And I got it done in, 17 minutes. Okay, see you later.